It was a completely ordinary Tuesday evening, the kind that doesn't deserve remembering. I only went out because I was out of toothpaste and the idea of skipping it one more night felt weirdly intolerable. The nearest supermarket is one of those mid-sized chain stores on the edge of the residential block, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and aisles that always smell faintly like cardboard and melted plastic. I remember the date because I checked my phone while I was standing in line, April 8, 8:41 p.m. The queue at checkout was longer than I expected. Not chaotic, just slow in that resigned, end-of-day way. People standing too close without acknowledging it, baskets hanging from tired hands, the soft beeping of barcode scanners bleeding into each other like a dull rhythm. I ended up behind a man in a gray hoodie holding a six-pack of cheap beer and nothing else. In front of him was an older woman with a full cart, and further ahead I could see the cashier moving with mechanical patience, not rushing, not slowing. I wasn't really paying attention to anyone. My mind was doing that thing it does when you're tired but not exhausted enough to shut off completely, just drifting between thoughts that don't connect properly. I remember looking at the shelf near the checkout, the one with gum and chocolate bars arranged like an afterthought. I was trying to decide if I wanted anything sweet, even though I didn't. That's when I scratched the back of my neck. Nothing dramatic. Just a small, absent motion. Fingertips under hair, a quick rub, then my hand dropped back down. A second later, maybe a second and a half, I noticed the man in the gray hoodie do the exact same thing. Same hand. Same spot. Same lazy scratch. Weird coincidence, I told myself. People mimic each other all the time without realizing it. You see someone yawn, you yawn. You adjust your posture, someone else does too. It's normal. I genuinely believed that for about 30 more seconds. Except it didn't stop there. When I shifted my weight from my left foot to my right, he did it too. Not immediately, there was a delay. A clean, consistent delay, like someone replaying my actions with a slight buffer. I frowned a little and adjusted my glasses. The moment my fingers touched the frame, the man in front of me did the same thing. That was the first time I actually felt something cold in my stomach, but I told myself I was being stupid. Maybe I had just noticed a pattern that wasn't there. Maybe I was hyper-aware because I was tired. That happens sometimes. I remember specifically thinking, "You're exhausted, go home, eat something." So I tested it. I don't know why exactly, something in me needed to confirm I was wrong. I raised my hand and lightly tapped my cheek, just once, like I was checking if I was awake. Behind the hoodie man, the woman with the cart did it too. Then the cashier. Then, in sequence, further down the line, like a ripple moving backward through a still body of water. Tap. 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 Each one delayed by the same amount of time. Not random. Not close enough to be imitation. Exact. I remember my breathing changing before I even realized I was scared. I turned my head slightly to the right, slow and deliberate. 6 people in the queue behind me repeated it. Not just the direction. The exact speed. The exact angle. Like a staged performance where everyone had rehearsed my movements in advance. No one looked surprised. No confusion. No laughter. No, what the hell was that, faces. Just repetition, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I turned my head back forward slowly, forcing myself to act normal even though my hands felt oddly disconnected from my body. The hoodie man in front of me didn't just copy me, he seemed to anticipate the end of the motion, as if he was waiting for the cue to finish it. I stared at the gum rack again, pretending to think about buying something. My reflection in the glass packaging felt wrong. Like a trigger being held too tightly. Then I noticed something worse. When I wasn't moving, neither were they. The entire line was waiting on me. Not just watching. Waiting. Behind me, I heard a soft rustle, someone shifting their stance. I didn't turn around. Because I was suddenly, painfully aware that if I did, they would all turn with me. And I had no idea what would happen if I stopped moving at all. I stayed in the line for what felt like too long. In reality, I was trying to figure out what rule I was dealing with. If it was a prank, there had to be someone coordinating it. But the problem was scale. When I slowly shifted my gaze, I could see into adjacent registers. Other queues. Other customers. All of them doing it. I swallowed hard and forced myself to do something small, something I could dismiss later if it turned out I was imagining things. I lifted my left hand and slowly spread my fingers apart. Nothing dramatic. Just an open palm. For a moment, nothing happened. The store kept its usual noise, beeping scanners, the low hum of refrigerators, the distant shuffle of carts. I almost convinced myself it was normal again. Then the cashier at my register stopped mid-motion. Her scanner hovered above a pack of bread. A beat passed. And she lifted her left hand. Fingers spread. Exactly like mine. The man in front of me followed. Then the woman behind him. Then the next person. Then the next. It wasn't a chain reaction. It wasn't like dominoes falling. It was the same action repeated across multiple points in space with identical delay, like the whole environment was running the same input through different bodies. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. The woman with the cart in front of the hoodie man had a baby in the seat. A toddler, maybe 1 year old. The baby was looking directly at me. And when the adults raised their hands, the baby raised its tiny hand too. Slowly. Deliberately. With the same spread fingers. Except the expression on its face wasn't neutral. It was focused. Not confused. Not playful. Focused in a way that didn't belong on something that small. My throat tightened instantly. My body tried to step back before I told it to, and I stopped myself. I didn't want to trigger anything larger. I lowered my hand. The entire line lowered theirs a second later. Perfect synchronization again, but delayed just enough to feel wrong, like watching a reflection that couldn't quite keep up. I turned slightly toward the aisle, just enough to test something less obvious. I scratched my wrist. Behind me, I heard the soft fabric movement of multiple sleeves shifting at once. Scratch. 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 I didn't even have to look anymore. I could hear it. Not as individual sounds, but as a collective echo of my own movement translated through dozens of joints. That's when the panic stopped being emotional. It became something else, structural. Like realizing the floor you've been standing on isn't attached to anything. I spoke without meaning to. What is this? My voice came out quieter than I expected. Rough. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the entire supermarket said it. Not loudly. Not shouting. Just spoken in my tone, my volume, my pacing, spread across every person like a delayed broadcast. What is this? The sound didn't feel like an answer. It didn't feel like communication at all. It felt like playback. I took a step back instinctively, and immediately regretted it. Every person in every visible aisle stepped back. Not looking at each other. Looking at me. It wasn't mimicry in the normal sense. There was no individuality in the response. No variation. No interpretation. They weren't reacting to me. They were bound to me. Like my actions were the only source of motion available in the entire building. I did something stupid then. I dropped my keys. They slipped from my hand and hit the tiled floor with a sharp metallic clatter. I think part of me hoped it would break it, something unpredictable, something outside the pattern. The sound echoed through the supermarket. And then every single person produced the same sound. Not by dropping anything. With their voices. A perfect metallic imitation of the impact, rising and fading at the exact same timing. Even the baby. A small, sharp approximation of metal hitting tile, coming from a mouth that should not have been capable of understanding what it meant. That was the moment I stopped thinking this was happening to me. And started thinking I was the source of it. I bent down slowly to pick up my keys. The moment I touched them, I felt the entire room inhale with me, waiting for the next signal. And I understood something that made my skin feel too tight. They weren't copying me because they were watching me. They were copying me because there was nothing else to do. No independent movement. No separate intention. Just a delay. Just echo. And I was the original sound. When I finally stood up, I didn't move again. Neither did they. The entire supermarket froze. For the next instruction I didn't remember agreeing to give. I needed to leave. That thought arrived simple and unavoidable. I reached down and picked up my shopping basket. The moment my fingers closed around the handle, I heard it, a soft collective shift behind me. Dozens of hands gripping invisible baskets in the exact same position. I didn't look back. I started walking toward the exit. Step by step. Careful. Measured. And behind me, the entire supermarket moved with me. Not immediately. There was still a delay. But it was shorter now. Noticeably shorter. Not a full second anymore. Maybe half. Less. I could feel it tightening like something being pulled taut. The automatic doors at the front didn't slide open when I approached. They waited. As if even the building itself required confirmation. I took another step forward. Only then did they open. Behind me, synchronized footsteps. Too many to count. All delayed just enough to be distinguishable, but close enough that it sounded like a single organism learning how to walk. I pushed through the doors. Cold air hit my face immediately. Outside should have felt like relief. It didn't. Because the street was wrong. It wasn't empty, but it wasn't alive in the way streets usually are. Cars parked at uneven angles along the curb. A taxi idling at the intersection. A man stood near a bus stop holding a cigarette halfway to his mouth. All of them facing the supermarket entrance. Waiting. I stepped out fully. And every single one of them moved. Not at once. Not instantly. But the delay was shrinking again. Faster now. A car's windshield wipers flicked on in sync with my blink. The man at the bus stop raised his cigarette when I adjusted my grip on the basket. The taxi driver turned his head exactly as I turned mine slightly to scan the street. I stopped walking. Everything stopped with me. I tried to breathe slowly, carefully, keeping my movements minimal. But even that felt risky. My chest rising slightly made two parked cars shift their suspension in identical motion. I lowered my basket to the ground. The sound of plastic touching pavement echoed once. Then everywhere. Not a replay. Not a sequence. Just the same impact expressed through everything around me. A dog near the corner, one I hadn't noticed before, sat perfectly still, staring at me. When I shifted my weight, it moved its front paw. Not in hesitation. In precision. I felt something close to nausea, but it wasn't physical. It was the realization that I couldn't tell where my influence ended anymore. I took one step backward. The entire street stepped back with me. The delay was almost gone now. Barely perceptible. A fraction of a second. Maybe less. Which meant I couldn't test anything safely anymore. Every movement was becoming immediate consequence. If I ran, they would run. If I fell, they would fall. If I stopped that thought before it finished forming. Because I could already feel it trying to happen. I turned sharply down a narrow side street between buildings. Not thinking, just reacting. The alley was tight, concrete walls on both sides, lit by a flickering overhead lamp that buzzed faintly. Behind me, I heard movement. Not footsteps anymore. Just synchronized repositioning, like the entire world realigning itself to follow a narrower path. I didn't run. I couldn't risk it. But I walked faster. Every step felt like pulling reality forward with me. And the delay was now almost nothing. A hair's breadth. A thought's distance. I reached the end of the alley and stopped abruptly. There was a large glass storefront ahead. Dark, reflective. Too clean for this part of the city. It stretched across the building like a black mirror. And behind me, silence. Absolute. No movement. No echo. No delay at all. They had stopped exactly when I stopped. Perfectly. Like the world was holding its breath through me. I turned slowly to look back. The alley was full. Not crowded. Not chaotic. Just filled with people standing still in positions that mirrored nothing yet. Waiting. I felt my hand rise slightly toward my face before I even decided to move it. And that's when I noticed something in the glass. My reflection wasn't moving. It was standing perfectly still, looking at me. And smiling. Not a friendly smile. Not an expression I had ever made. Behind me, I felt something shift, subtle, inside my own body. Not pain. Not numbness. Something that took me a moment to name. Control. Like something had just decided it didn't need my permission anymore. My arm lifted again, but slower this time. Not fully mine. And in the glass, my reflection stayed still, watching me move without it. My arm kept rising even though I wasn't telling it to. Not in a sudden, violent way, nothing like possession in movies. It was worse than that. Gradual, precise, and completely indifferent to my intention. Like my body had discovered a second layer of instruction underneath mine and decided that layer mattered more. I tried to stop it. My brain sent the signal. I felt it clearly, sharp and urgent. The movement continued anyway. My fingers reached my cheek. Light contact. Just like before. Except I didn't choose it. Behind me, the alley responded. Not a sound exactly, more like synchronized confirmation. A wave of tiny movements aligning with mine. Shoulders shifting, heads tilting, a foot adjusting its position on concrete. No delay anymore. That was gone completely. The world wasn't echoing me now. It was executing me. My reflection in the glass storefront remained still, smiling faintly, watching my body perform actions it wasn't participating in. I leaned closer to the glass without meaning to. My reflection didn't. It stayed exactly where it was. Detached. Observing. I whispered something, I don't even remember deciding to speak. Stop. Nothing happened at first. Then, everywhere behind me, I heard it repeated. Not as an echo. As confirmation. Stop. Same voice. Same tone. Same fragile attempt at control. My reflection's smile widened slightly. Not dramatically. Just enough to be wrong. And then something changed. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was choosing what to keep. My body stepped forward on its own. One step. Then another. Slow, deliberate, toward the glass. I resisted as hard as I could, locking my knees, trying to anchor myself in place. But resistance felt like pushing against something that had already decided the outcome and was simply waiting for me to accept it. Behind me, the alley remained perfectly still. Not frozen. Held. Like an audience waiting for a cue that had already been written. My hand rose again. This time toward my own face. I could feel every micro-adjustment in muscle happening without my permission, like my body was optimizing the movement. And my reflection finally moved. Not in sync. Not delayed. Ahead. It lifted its hand first. Touched its own face before I did. And I felt something inside me shift in response, not emotionally, but physically. Like the gesture had triggered a deeper layer of behavior I didn't know existed. My fingers touched my jaw. But I didn't initiate it. It felt like I was confirming something that had already been decided elsewhere. Behind me, the alley changed soundlessly. I didn't turn, but I could feel it. The people there were no longer waiting in stillness. They were settling into positions, postures, orientations, like a system receiving a final command. The delay wasn't just gone. The concept of delay no longer made sense. There was no after anymore. Only execution. My reflection tilted its head slightly, studying me like I was an unfinished version of it. I pressed my palm against the glass. My reflection didn't press back. It simply watched my hand arrive, as if confirming alignment. Then something subtle happened, something I almost missed. My reflection blinked. I didn't. At least, I don't think I did. But I can't be sure anymore. Because my hand is still against the glass as I write this, still touching it, and I don't remember deciding to keep it there. And behind me, I can hear movement in the alley again. Not echo. Not imitation. Just continuation. As if whatever is on the other side has finally learned enough of me to stop needing me at all. And the last thing I'm certain of is this: my reflection is no longer waiting for me to catch up. I kept my hand on the glass longer than I intended. At some point I became aware of how cold it was, not the glass itself, but the sensation of it, like temperature was being processed through something that wasn't fully mine anymore. My palm didn't feel like a boundary between me and the surface. It felt like a connector. My reflection didn't move away. It just watched me touching it. Then it did something small. It leaned closer. Not pressing against the glass, not copying me. Approaching. I felt my own body respond before I could think about resisting. My face moved forward a few centimeters. The distance between me and the reflection disappeared too quickly. Too smoothly. And for the first time I noticed something I'd somehow missed: my reflection was not perfectly identical anymore. Its eyes were just slightly more focused than mine. Like mine were still loading. I tried to pull my hand away from the glass. It didn't move. Not because it resisted. That would have been easier to understand. It didn't feel like resistance at all. It felt like the decision had already been made somewhere else, and my awareness of it was arriving late. My fingers slowly curled. Not in panic. In compliance. Behind me, the alley erupted into synchronized motion again. I still didn't turn, but I didn't need to. I could feel it like pressure in the air. People shifting into place, not walking, not reacting, just adjusting into whatever positions they were meant to occupy next. No delay. No echo. Only alignment. My reflection raised its hand. I did too. But I didn't remember choosing it first anymore. That thought scared me more than anything else that night. Because it meant the order of events was no longer reliable inside my own head. I tried to speak again. My mouth opened. And for a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then my voice came from everywhere around me, slightly ahead of me too, like the sound didn't originate from my throat anymore. It originated from the space around me, deciding where my throat should have been. Please. The alley repeated it instantly. My reflection didn't. It just watched. And smiled again. And then I realized something worse: it was no longer reacting to me. It was anticipating what I would become. My hand finally left the glass. Not because I chose it. Because the glass did. It released me gently, like letting go of something that had finished transferring. I stumbled backward. For the first time, the reflection didn't mirror the stumble. It stayed perfectly upright. Balanced. Stable. And I felt it, an immediate, uncomfortable mismatch between my body and what it was supposed to be doing. Like I'd been slightly misaligned with myself. The alley behind me was no longer just full. It felt layered. As if more people existed there than I could physically see, stacked in invisible positions, waiting in configurations I couldn't fully comprehend. All of them still. All of them watching. Not me. The reflection. I turned my head slightly without intending to. Just a fraction. The entire alley turned with me. But the reflection didn't. It stayed facing forward. Looking at something beyond the glass. Beyond me. Then it stepped forward. Through the glass. Not breaking it. Not shattering it. Just passing through it like it wasn't a barrier anymore. And I felt my body try to follow. My shoulder moved forward first. Then my chest. Not all at once, piece by piece, like different parts of me were being given separate instructions. The reflection stood inches from me now. Outside the glass. Inside my space. Looking at me like I was the one behind the barrier. It spoke. Not aloud. Not exactly inside my head either. Just present, in the way that a smell can be present, or the feeling that you've forgotten something important. You were never the original. My mouth moved in response. I genuinely can't tell you whether I said it or whether it said it through me. The alley behind me shifted again. They weren't waiting for me anymore. They were waiting for it. For the version of me that no longer needed me. My knees bent slightly. Not collapsing. Positioning. My reflection tilted its head. And I understood, finally, what the delay had been. Not time. It was calibration. An adjustment period. Something learning the precise weight of every small motion I made, the exact angle of a scratched neck, the specific timing of a blink, until it didn't need to wait for me to perform them first. My body took one last step forward. And I remember thinking, very calmly, that I should probably be terrified. But I couldn't feel much of anything by then. And I'm not sure if that's because I'd gone numb. Or because whatever was doing the feeling wasn't entirely me anymore.